My name is Helen McCarthy. I am 71 years old, and I'll tell you how my daughter called me Mom for the last time, before trying to tear me out everything I've built in silence. Have you ever felt that someone you raised with all the love, someone who slept on your lap and ate from your plate, could he look you in the eye and still lie so calmly? That's that. This happened to me, and it happened inside my own house. I know that many people hear a story like this and think, but how can a mother not understand? Or was she really that naive? And I understand you, because I also asked myself these questions many, for many sleepless nights. But today, I promise, if you stay with me until the end, Moa, you will understand everything. You will see how time reveals the secrets that love hides. And how can a woman go from being betrayed, the owner of the game, without raising her voice, without fighting, without moving from her place? Because not all revenge needs to be loud. Sometimes it's enough. Andoblia, Unnamal Captbound, Isotatius Unlookout, Adashtrea. Let them bury themselves. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. I am not a woman of scandal. I have always preferred silence to discussions. But that day, when I heard my daughter on the phone say, Mudon, what in a calm voice, as if it were any other news. Let's go to Europe tomorrow. Mom, I sold his beach house and his car. We needed the money. I knew then, that I was no longer her mother. I was just an obstacle in the way. I didn't cry. I didn't answer. I just hung up the phone and went to the drawer where George kept our secrets. And that's when everything starts to change. Because what she didn't know is that most of what was mine, it was never in her name. And now, if you've ever gone through some disappointment that only the soul understands, if someone you loved turned their backs and called you old with their eyes, even without saying it, so stay here with me. Press the like button. Subscribe to the channel. Why? Because this story is not just mine. It's ours. And telling it out loud only makes sense if I feel like there's someone on the other side, really listening. I always wake up at the same time, even without an alarm clock. I don't know if it's the custom of a lifetime, or if it's the body that has already become accustomed to the silence of the house. At 6:30 in the morning, the light begins to pass through the white curtain of the kitchen, and the first sound I hear is that of the old wall clock ticking the seconds, as if to remind me that time is still ticking, even if slowly. I drink my cold coffee in the backyard. I always forget the cup in some corner of the sink, and when I go to drink it, it's already cooled. But I don't care. The taste is no longer in the coffee. It's in the memory. Wow. George used to say that I made the worst coffee in South Carolina, but I drank every last drop just to see me smile. It was our little morning theater. Today, I drink alone. Let it stand to come, and the smile takes a long time to come. I live in a simple house, but full of memories. Each corner has a stored sound, an old perfume, the creaking rocking chair I know was just door, The china cabinet he hated, and I insisted on keeping. And the frame with our photo in Folly Beach, on the balcony of the blue wooden house, with the granddaughters, still small, running with buckets of sand. That beach house, it was our refuge. We built with what we had, brick by brick. George sold insurance. I made sweets for outside. It took years before we were able to finish everything, but when we were done, it was like we had bought a piece of heaven. Samantha grew up there. Noi. He learned to swim in that sea. It was on that balcony that she told me she was in love with Jason. I remember her expression, eyes shining, full of plans. He looked like a good guy, hard-working, polite, and he liked to fish. Like George, I wanted to believe that I would be a good son-in-law. I wanted to believe that she would be happy, and that he would love her as her father loved her. In recent months, the two have started to visit me frequently. Now walked and talked one. They showed up on Sundays, brought cornbread. Now on your town, stayed for lunch. Jason asked about the plumbing. Samantha insisted on checking my exams, checking my medicines. Why? You need to rest. Mom, leave things to us. The world has changed. These bureaucracies are complicated, she said in that sweet voice, as one who cares, not as one who commands. At first, it was good. I felt seen. After Georgie's death, and would tell her more so. The emptiness was so great that any gesture of affection seemed like a miracle. So I handed over the papers, let them take care of the accounts, the passwords, the keys. I thought I was being supported. I didn't realize that I was being disarmed. I remember a specific day. It was raining in Charleston. They showed up unannounced, soaking wet, laughing like two teenagers. Samantha took off her coat, hugged me tight. Jason brought flowers, white daisies, my favorites. They said they were there just to see how I was. We spent the afternoon playing cards and remembering stories from her childhood. It was one of the few times I really laughed since George's funeral. And that's why everything hurts so much now, because we are only stabbed by those who are close. The stranger has no access to our heart, but the daughter, ma'am, this one has all the keys. You know, sometimes I find myself thinking, was it me who taught too much? Could it be that, by giving everything, I created someone who did not know how to measure limits? Or does blind love have too high a price? If you've ever felt something similar, if you've ever trusted someone who used it against you, leave a comment here. He writes, I've lived it, or it's true, just so I know I'm not talking to myself. Because there are times when loneliness is not a lack of people. It is an excess of silence. But at that time, I still believed. I believed that my daughter was approaching because of homesickness, that Jason was just a man trying to be helpful, that maybe, after everything I've been through, life still wanted to give me a little sweetness in the end. I had no idea what was already being plotted behind my back, and worse, by the hands that I myself rocked to sleep. Can you believe that? Even after everything, I was still the one who made Samantha's birthday cake that year. But do you know what marked me the most that day? The way she looked at me when she blew out the candles. as if he knew that this would be the last birthday, with everything in place. And it was, because a short time later, she made a call to me. And one sentence, two breaks, and everything collapsed. I want to know what she told me? And what I found after that, hidden in George's last drawer? So listen to me, because that's when the truth starts to change sides. The first time I noticed something different was on a Tuesday afternoon. It was hot, the kind of muggy heat that only Charleston knows. Samantha entered the house with her sunglasses still on her face, talking on the phone to someone, and walking as if that floor was not the same one on which she took her first steps. Jason came after her. Shout koam when Susta Straundast, laughing at some joke she had told. They didn't take off their shoes. They didn't ask how I was. They went straight to the living room. How? Where there were some boxes with George's belongings that I hadn't yet had the courage to touch. She glanced at it and said, "We should donate all this, Mom, to clear space, you know? And before I could answer, she pulled out his pocket watch, the one he wore to dinners, and put it in her purse like it was nothing. That hurt, not by the clock, but for the absence of any respect in the gesture. Jason, thou sound town, and the card, seeing my expression, calm, tried to break the mood. You know, Helen, if you want, we can take care of this part for you. It's very emotional, very heavy. You need to move on." I just shook my head, because sometimes silence is the only shield we have. In the following days, they came up with ideas. We could sell Dad's truck, right? She doesn't even care properly anymore. The pickup truck? George spent hours taking care of that F-150. I said she was stubborn just like me. Everyone knew that that car was the piece of him that was still purring in the garage. But Samantha spoke with a practicality that made me cold, like someone who gets rid of an old piece of furniture. I tried to say that I preferred to keep it, but she laughed and replied, Mom, you don't even drive anymore. What are you going to save it for?" Jason added, "No, an old dessert turnstile tire. There in Europe, no one keeps this stuff." Europe? Mayhem. Action 10. A nice dessert tax on the list. It was the third time he mentioned such a trip to Europe. I asked him about it, and he said they were studying to open a coffee shop in Lisbon. Charleston is saturated, now overwhelmed, you know? And you're with this pile of goods that are useless. And it was in this you that I stopped. Because George was no longer here. And he knew it. He used the plural to include me, but the tone made it clear that, he was you. In his mind, I was already just a detail. I spent days ruminating on those conversations, trying to understand what was happening. Was I exaggerating? Was grief distorting things? After all, they were always coming, taking care of everything. Wasn't that what I needed? Maybe it was just the modern way of dealing with things. Maybe it was worry. But deep down, there was something that didn't fit. It was like a dress you've worn for years, but suddenly it starts to tighten on your chest. One night, with you, I overheard Samantha talking to Jason on the porch. They didn't know I was awake. They spoke quietly, and but the window glass was ajar. She said, "If we manage to liquidate at least the beach and the car, we can already enter there. The rest will come later." And he replied, "Your mother is very attached to these memories. It has to be gradually. I'm not there. Star. If you press it now, it can lock." I froze. Now, I stood there, now, standing in the hallway, like a child listening to a secret I shouldn't. And for the first time in many years, I felt fear inside my own home. The next day, one in a hound, they pretended that nothing happened. They brought cookies, sat at the table, talked about the financial market as if I understood. And I did what so many mothers do. I kept silent, smile, why? And I served tea, because sometimes the love we have is so great that we prefer to pretend we didn't see it, just so we don't accept that we were betrayed. I believed for a moment that I might have misunderstood, that maybe it was a phase, that she was just a lost daughter trying to get it right, and that that he was only a passing influence. But the visits began to change their tone. They were no longer long, lunches full of conversation. They were meetings. They came in with folders, documents, cell phones, Jason showed charts. Samantha spoke of wealth management. They said that I should open a joint account to facilitate transfers and payments. They suggested that I sign an authorization for the movement of goods. I said I wanted to think. They looked at each other. Jason commented, "Wow, of course. No rush. But these things need decision." Helen, Misty, how, Wistacho, Hannah, and how, Letiv, Festagrize. Time is money. I went back to my room and sat on the bed. I stared at the open closet. No, where George's suits were still standing. And I thought, if he were here, what would he say? I felt small, alone, and, at the same time, ashamed to doubt my own daughter. How do we look at someone who breastfed and wonder if they are being deceived? But that same day, I received a letter from the bank. It's just a movement notice, an extract, but there, very small. It said that Samantha's name had been included as the second holder in one of my accounts. I didn't remember authorizing it. Called Shen. They said that the form was signed. I asked for a copy. When it arrived, I trembled. The signature was mine, but I didn't remember signing that. And then I remembered a day, weeks before, when she brought some health insurance papers and asked me to sign while Jason baked a cake in the kitchen. I signed it, and I trusted. It was there that I realized something bigger was being put together, and I was the only one who wasn't seeing the board. But what they didn't know, there was a piece that no one had touched yet, a piece that George left hidden, and that I unintentionally, was about to find. Have you ever suspected someone so close, but Were you afraid to confirm? So wait. Because what I discovered, ah, changes everything. It was a gray Friday, one of those that seemed to carry a strange weight in the air. I was at the clinic, waiting for the result of a routine exam. On the television, in the waiting room, a woman was talking about healthy eating, but I could only hear the ticking of the clock. They had been late for more than half an hour, and my mind was wandering. I thought of George, how he hated hospitals, and how he held my hand, even when he was the one who was sick. Suddenly, the cell phone rang. Lihao. It was Samantha. I answered with a small smile, still waiting for that sweet voice that so often calmed me. But what I heard was something cold, dry, which didn't match any memory I had of my daughter. Hi, Mom. Just calling to let you know that we sold your beach house and the car, too. The money will help us on the business trip to Europe. Let's go tomorrow. I'll explain it to you better later. Kiss. And he hung up. Is that it? Like someone canceling a dinner order. No. I stood there, no, with my cell phone still against my ear, without reaction. The nurse called me twice by name, but it felt like my body had been trapped inside a bubble. My house, my beach, that place where George asked me to marry him, where we taught Samantha how to ride a bike, where the granddaughters learned to float in the warm water. All that sold. Without my voice. Why, now, without my presence, without my consent. George F-150, which still had his coat in the back seat, handed to a stranger. That was not an oversight. It was a cut, a separation. It was the confirmation of what my heart already knew, but my hope still tried to deny. My daughter was not taking care of me. He was getting rid of me. I left the clinic without waiting for the result. Why, and so you. I walked to the corner and sat on the bench at a bus stop. The world went by. Ice, time, the cars, the people, the horns. But inside me, everything was still. I am so calm. I saw myself there, huddled together, a 71-year-old woman, with a purse in her lap and her soul in pieces. And I asked myself, well, when did I become a nuisance? At what point did my story cease to have value? A couple passed me, both holding hands, smiling, and I felt jealous, envy of something so simple. I returned home on foot, even with pain in my legs. I needed to feel the ground. I needed to hear my footsteps to remember that I was still here. When I entered, I went straight to the kitchen. I put the kettle on the fire and sat down at the table. The old radio was still tuned to George's favorite station. An old song was playing, one of those that make your chest tighten. I looked around. Everything was still mine, but I no longer felt like I owned anything. I went to the living room, got the picture frame of Folly Beach. In this photo, Samantha was 7 years old. She was wearing a red swimsuit and tangled hair. George carried her on his back, and I laughed with my mouth open, as if I had not yet learned to swallow the pain. I touched the frame with my fingertips and said, in a low voice, "Did you sell that, daughter? And now? Did you sell that day too?" I sat there until nightfall. When the light went out, I got up slowly and went to the bedroom. I opened the last drawer of the oak dresser, the one George always said I should never touch, except when everything starts to fall apart. Inside it, inside it, a beige envelope. Now, I recognized his lyrics from afar. Helen, Nanny's Chase, for when you need to remember who you are. My fingers trembled. Oh, my fingers. My eyes burned, because at that moment, I knew, I was going to open it. And in there, I saw, inside was the beginning of everything. Do you dare to find out what a husband can keep hidden from his daughter? So get ready, once again, because this part, even I wasn't ready to see. No, the envelope was thick, heavy, new, and had that old smell of paper kept for decades, a mixture of old wood and time. I put him on the bed, took a deep breath, and sat down slowly, as if preparing to open a wound that has already bled too much. The cover, I say covering winter, Arnoides, written in George crooked handwriting. Read, wed. Only open it when no one else is holding your hand. That went through me like a cold blade, because that's exactly how I felt. Alone, no one holding my hand. I untied the cord. Inside, there was a folder. Now, and stage account and got the gears to his seat. Some papers in smaller envelopes and a loose sheet, folded in four. I opened it carefully. It was a letter. It started with Helen. No, my love. Nay. And I could no longer read aloud. His handwriting was firm. No. But you could see the hesitant strokes at the end of each sentence, as if he knew he wouldn't be here to explain. He said that he had created a holding company years ago, when he began to notice changes in Samantha's way of dealing with money. He said that he used the name of an old colleague from his army days to record everything in secrecy, and that the company owned 4 properties scattered around Charleston, including the building where Samantha and Jason lived. What's more, you added shall lie. The profits from the rentals were deposited in a legal account, which I didn't even know existed. And do you know who was the only beneficiary? I closed my eyes, and in that instant, something inside me changed. It wasn't anger, nor sadness. It was lucidity. I was alive, and more than that, I wasn't helpless. George didn't leave me alone. He made me prepared. And now, everything they thought they had in their hands, it was still mine. They just didn't know. Why? I got out of bed, walked around the house, as if entering a battlefield, but not to war, to observe the terrain. I started to connect the dots. The joint account, the rushed papers, the sale of the beach house. They thought they had won, but little did they know that the game was just beginning. I opened the closet, took off my coat, put on my shoes, and went to the accounting office where George used to take his documents. Closed. Everything was now online. I returned home and spent the whole afternoon in front of the old computer, typing letter by letter the name of the holding company, and there she was, active, working, and at the top of the page, CEO, Helen McCarthy. Now, I felt a strange peace. It was not happiness. It was a firm certainty, like someone holding a rope after almost falling into the abyss. For the first time since that call, I felt strong. There was no need for confrontation, wow, nor of immediate revenge. Time would help me. And the truth. Well, she was already by my side. I'm here, opening my heart, telling my story in the truest way I can. If you're listening there, if any of this has ever touched your soul, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel, because I still have a lot to tell you. Stories that hurt, but that also heal. I went back to the room with the briefcase in my arms. I put it inside a box along with his letter. I kept it at the top of the closet, where only I can reach. Then I sat on the balcony with a lukewarm coffee and stared at the sky. The clouds passed slowly, and I thought about how patient time is. He doesn't scream. He waits. And in the end, I took a so Alcibiade or not. It shows everything. But that day, something told me that I had not yet seen the worst, and that my daughter's next visit would bring more than fake smiles. Can you imagine what she tried to do when she realized that I still had something that she didn't control? So listen well. Why? I knows I didn't security, because what she did afterwards almost took me off my feet for good. That night, after putting away George's letter, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, as if even the furniture was listening to my thoughts. I walked from one room to another aimlessly, like a soul that came back from somewhere and still didn't know where the body was. I walked past the living room, touched the arms of the couch where he used to lay his head, looked at the rug we had bought together on a trip to Asheville, and found myself standing there in the center of the house I had built myself with my own hands, but which now looked like a storefront, clean, empty, terror, exposed. And it was at the moment, between one memory and another, that the last morning with George came to me. It was a clear Sunday. He made pancakes, burned one of them, as he always did, and handed me the plate with a crooked smile. He said, well, everything I left for you. At the time, I laughed, patted him on the shoulder, and replied, yes, Leaf, it was work, George. But now that sentence had a weight. It was a key. He knew, maybe not everything, but I knew that one day I would need to remember that my life was not just an extension of others. That I was more than a mother, more than a widow. I was. I, and no one else could take that away from me. I sat on the edge of the bed with that memory across my chest. I didn't cry, but I felt a bitter taste in my mouth, something that rises slowly and has no name. It was not sadness. It was something deeper, a kind of anger that I had never felt. Not anger at Samantha, nor at Jason, but of myself, for having believed for so long that it was enough to love a lot to be loved back. I dedicated my youth, my body, my soul, my energy, and now, at 71, I was treated as a lady who only gets in the way, a hindrance, a name on top of a deed that needed to get out of the way. And it was at that moment that everything changed. Pain has become a strategy. The hurt turned to silence, and silence became flat. I got up and went to the garage. The light was off, but the smell of old oil still filled the air. I approached the door slowly, almost afraid to confirm what I already suspected. Open, Mary, Nakanen. The F-150 was no longer there. The space where she stood was empty, bare, like a tooth pulled out of her mouth. I leaned against the door frame and felt my legs weaken. That truck was the last physical trace of George who still breathed with me. It was the place where he sang out of tune. Wow. Where he left the notes stuck to the steering wheel to remind me to pick up the bread. Where he wrote our name with a box cutter under the seat. That wasn't just a car. It was the whole story of a lifetime. And she was taken, sold, wine, wanted, wine. Without a word, me here down, hadbata. Without a request, no respect. From there, I understood. They weren't going to stop. One. I could be alive, lucid, high, standing, now. But in their minds, I'd already been removed from the map. It was just a signature, an obstacle to be overcome. But what they forgot, it's just that as long as I breathed, I was the owner of the memory. And whoever has the memory has the power. I went back to the kitchen. I went back to the kitchen. I opened the cabinet where I kept the recipe books and took a blank sheet. I started writing. I listed everything. Names, dates, documents, the holding company, the real estate, the sale of the truck, Samantha's voice on the phone, every detail that could be used as evidence. It was not for anyone to see. It was for me to remember that I wasn't crazy, that it was not delirium, that all that was really happening. After that, I made some tea and sat down on the couch. The night was cold, but inside me, a fire began to grow that I did not know. A heat that did not burn, but illuminated. And I knew then, that it was no longer useful to ask for explanations, cry, or try to rescue something that had already died inside her a long time ago. The daughter I raised with so much love no longer existed. In her place, there was another woman, one who used the word mother as a safe key. And when I understood that, I prepared myself more way. But what I didn't expect was what would come next. Because the next day, she showed up, and what she brought, he was going to force me to look into the eyes of betrayal from the front. Without a shield, do you dare to listen to what she said to me, sitting in my own living room? So get ready, because even I couldn't contain what came next. She arrived in the morning, unannounced. He had that polite smile that only appears when someone is too guilty to look you in the eye. He had a cake in his hand, bought one of those from the supermarket, with a shiny icing that doesn't fool anyone. I came to see how you are, Mom. The voice was sweet, but the eyes, his eyes seemed to measure the environment, as if they were looking for something. A forgotten document, an open box, a sign that I knew. I offered coffee. She sat down. Wow. Jason stayed in the car, sorting things out on his phone. As she put it, we talked over the weather, the the news, some neighborhood gossip, but the atmosphere was glass. Any longer sentence would crack, and it was in the silence between two spoonfuls that I said, Did you know that Dad had a holding company? Her face hardened. The hand froze in the air. He tried to disguise it, laughed. No, I didn't know. How? What is this talk? I smiled slightly. Just curiosity. Sometimes we think we know people. Right? She did not answer. No. He said he needed to go. He left quickly, forgetting the cake, and I, with that in my hands, realized that I no longer felt pain. I felt strategy. That same day, I put the documents in a brown folder, put on my blue coat, and went to the office of Richard Coleman, the lawyer who handled the purchase of the Folly Beach house when George was still alive. He was a quiet man, with gray hair and a deep voice. When he saw me, I don't honest you, he stood up as if he were seeing a ghost. Ellen, yes, then, okay, I don't know, cases. It's good to see you. I sat down, handed over the papers, and said just one sentence. I want everything back, but no one can know that it is me. He flipped through everything carefully. Heavy silence. He read the letter. He read the contracts. He consulted the system. When he looked up, he was serious. The beach house was sold. Now, yes, legally, but new. The lady's signature on the power of attorney of the car was collected under a defect of consent. This can be reversed. What's more, the holding company is still his. They haven't touched this asset because they probably don't even know it exists. I took a deep breath. Wow. So what do we do? He closed the portfolio. We start. We spent the afternoon assembling the puzzle. Richard knew every corner of the law, every loophole. He explained to me that, calmly and discreetly, we could cancel the sale of the car, stop any movement in the holdings properties, and, most importantly, reorganize the documents so that no assets would be transferred without my direct and face-to-face authorization. And all that without Samantha or Jason knowing. Still, Makanai. When I left there, the sky was cloudy, but my chest had sunshine. I was no longer just a heartbroken lady. I was a woman with a plan. And, there's something I wanted to tell you, just between us. Sometimes, the strongest stories are not those full of screams or scandal, They are the ones that we live in silence, chewing each injustice slowly, until the time comes to return everything with elegance and firmness. So, stay with me until the end, because what she did to me, it will still turn inside out, and you'll want to see it in the following days. Richard began the proceedings. He called the broker responsible for the sale of the beach house, requested documents. He asked for access to the recordings of the meeting where the signature was recorded. Well, we discovered that the authorization I signed at the time was, in fact, part of a larger dossier where Jason had attached loose papers, taking advantage of my fragility and grief. The lyrics were there, but the deception, the intention, the abuse, they were too. Meanwhile, I kept the facade. I received calls from Samantha with the voice of a careful daughter. Jason sent messages asking if I needed anything, and I smiled inside, because justice sometimes begins with the pleasure of watching those who deceived you stumbling into one's own traps. But I knew I couldn't get ahead of myself. One false move, and they could try to reverse everything. Sell what was left. Do with another property what they did with the beach. I needed time. And time. At that time was the most precious asset I had. It was then that Richard asked me a question that gave me goosebumps. You want justice to be done? Or do you want them to feel what you felt? I was silent for a moment. I looked out the window. I saw a lady pushing a shopping cart on the sidewalk, slowly, with effort. And he said, I want both, but without lowering the level. I want them to feel, without me having to say a word. Notes. Richard just nodded, and we started preparing the first official notification. Can you imagine Samantha's face when she received an envelope with a court notice, without knowing that it came from me? That's that. But that was not what shook her the most. What really shook me, it was the next move, and I'll tell you, word for word. Life on Church Street has always been slow, as if time here likes to walk with short steps. The flowers in the windows change with the seasons, but the faces, those are always the same. People who watch through the crack in the curtain. Who know the noise of each gate, who notice when the milk cart does not pass. And it was precisely these people who started whispering when they saw George's truck disappear from the garage. Then the long looks, the whispered comments, the pats on the shoulder began when I went to the market. Helen, if you need anything, just call. Is everything okay there? Honey, some started to bring plates with apple pie, as if they wanted to feed me what they didn't even know. Pity. That was how, without saying a word, I became the poor widow on the street. But I smiled. I thanked each pie, each pat, each kindness with the same serenity of someone who understands the theater of life. I was wearing a role, and he did it perfectly. The hair up, the faded apron, the slower walk, everything rehearsed, because sometimes, to recover what is ours, we need to disguise ourselves as fragile. They thought I had lost everything, and I let them find it. because it was in silence that I was building my strength. One day, Mrs. Barlow, who lives 2 houses down from mine, brought me a basket of bread and said, "I heard your daughter has traveled. This is you, right? And that they sold that beautiful house of yours on the beach. What sadness!" I just shook my head. With that short smile I've learned to give when the pain is too great to explain. And she added, "No. What do these young people do nowadays? Helen? No. It's as if they no longer have a soul." I swallowed hard, because at that moment, I felt all that wanting to escape through my throat. But I held back. The soul was still there, and it was mine. As for theirs, well, I don't know where it ended up. It was at this stage that I realized something curious. People treat us according to the history they think we live. And suddenly, my story seemed like that of an abandoned, aimless woman who needed solace. But what no one knew was that I was more lucid and stronger than ever. Each day was a rehearsal for the right moment. Each pie was a blessing in disguise. Each hug a reminder that the truth, when it comes, breaks the silence with dignity. And sometimes what hurts the most is not what they take away from us. It's the way they take it off, without looking into the eyes, without saying thank you, without remembering the hand that one day gave food, paid for school, cleared fever, endured screaming, held the door open at dawn, hoping to return. Ingratitude is not a mistake. It's a choice. And she screams even when she comes in. Silence. If you've been through this, if you've ever felt that you were erased by those you lit up yourself, comment below. He just says, "I know what it's like," or "I understand you." Because sometimes all we want is to know that we are not feeling this alone. As the days passed, Samantha's visits ceased. Jason texted him 1 or 2 saying they were working things out for the trip, and that anything, just call. I answered with dots, short sentences. I let them think they were free, but inside, no. I saw the board form. Richard had already managed to block the transfer of the car. The signature investigation was underway, and the holding company's documentation had been updated in secrecy, all in my name. Everything as George wanted. I started to walk more around the neighborhood. On Sundays, I went to the small market they set up in the square, bought flowers, white daisies, George's favorites, the same ones Jason brought me one day, trying to gild the betrayal with perfume. Yoga with a night coat was. But now, the flowers were not for decoration. They were to remind me that I was still flourishing. At home, I reorganized the photo albums. I took out some frames. I repositioned others. I created a new order where happy moments came first, not to erase the pain, but to remember the value of what I built. Because that's what gives me strength, knowing that before the lie, love came. And this, no one takes me away. The phone rang one afternoon. It was the office of the notary. A document signed by Jason had been disputed. The attendant's voice was formal. but I could feel the discomfort. We are investigating the authenticity of some papers, and maybe you need to attend. Just as a reference, I just said, sure, whenever they want. Available. I hung up and looked at the sky. I felt that the wheel was starting to turn. Can you imagine what happens when those who thought they owned everything? Do you discover that you never had anything? So, get ready, because the day of truth is closer than they imagine. And me? Here I is go. Waiting. The news arrived as these things usually arrive in old neighborhoods, through the half-open gate and the sharp tone of the neighbor. It was Mrs. Lancaster, who lives in the greenhouse on the corner, who stopped me on the way to the market. She adjusted her glasses to her face, held my arm like someone holding a secret, and said, "Whoa," almost in a whisper, "Helen, Lidon Sina, Mano Kakot Chaya. Have you heard about your son-in-law? They say has wrapped up to his neck with a bench thing. Fraud, loans. These things that a new man thinks he will be able to handle." I stopped. I felt the blood go down my legs quickly, but I kept calm. I let out a "is that so?" and continued walking with the same light step as always. Inside, the heart beat differently. It was not a scare. It was confirmation. I returned home with the milk and flowers. I called Richard as soon as I closed the door. "No." "Ha ha." He answered the second ring. "One lives out." The firm voice as always. "Helen, Aeration Cobb, unstated couch now." I received the information earlier today. Jason used false documents to try to mortgage the apartment where they live. It seems that he tried to use the property as collateral for a high-risk loan in Spain, but the local bank did not accept the foreign registration. And now there is a federal investigation opening here. I sat on the kitchen chair carefully. "And Samantha?" I asked, my voice still low. "It's on its way. It should return next week. They said he will try to solve everything personally." I sighed. At last, it was coming, and it wasn't for me. It was for his own survival. The game, which until then had been a theater of pretense, was changing. The cards had been turned, and I held all the ones that really mattered. Richard asked me if I wanted to send the property ownership notice immediately, but I asked him to wait. "I want her to be here, that you look into my eyes when you receive, and I want you to come thinking that you still have control, because that's the only way he will understand what he did." I prepared the envelope myself. I used the holding company's letterhead. In it, a formal notice of eviction. The property located at Church Street, Unit 3B, is under the ownership of the company Shellpine Holdings. Considering the irregular use of the property and the absence of a current contract, voluntary eviction is requested within the legal period. Simple. Cold. Flawless. The signature at the end was mine, not just as an owner, but as someone who finally recognized his own value. I left the envelope with Richard. No, I asked for an absolute discretion. Give it to her at the right time, not before, not later, now. When she sets foot on American soil, I want her to feel what it's like to be surprised on the ground itself. The days that followed were of tense silence. Church Street went on with its routine. Kids going to school, dogs barking in the yards, the mailman smiling as usual, but inside me, time went differently. Wow. I looked at the clock as if watching a storm. I knew it was coming, and when it arrived, everything would be different. On Thursday morning, I learned that she had disembarked. A short, neat, emotionless message. Hi, Mom. We've arrived. Busy, week. I'll call you later. That word, we have arrived, gave me a shiver, as if it were still possible to pretend that there was a we. But I no longer lived in the plural. I stopped at the living room window and watched the gate, the same one she ran into at the age of 7, with her knees scraped and her hands dirty with sand. The same gate that, years later, more now, Nisabad, Haptira, she left dressed as a bride, with Jason holding her by the waist. Well, so much history. Wow, Anion Sib Tako did that. And now, lay, only the echo remained, and the weight. And you know what's curious? Even with everything, there was still a little piece in me that I wanted to understand. To know where I lost my daughter. At what a turn she decided that money was more important than love. But perhaps that answer would never come. And maybe it didn't even matter anymore. Well, because now it was my story that I was going to rewrite. Can you imagine what it's like to look deep into the eyes of someone who hurt you and smile, but not with sarcasm, with calm superiority, with the peace of those who survived their own fall and still got up with the crown in place? So stay here, because the moment of settlement is about to begin. She showed up at the gate on a clear morning, holding a small bag, sunglasses hiding her face, and a smile that no longer deceived me. He clapped his hands gently, as if asking permission to enter a world that was once his. Montauk. Yo. When I opened the door, I feigned surprise. Well, I thought I was still in Europe. She took off her glasses, gave a half smile, and replied, "Reading said too. Change of plans. I thought it best to come and see how you were." And there was the first lie of the day. I turned around slowly, with that calm way that only well-healed pain teaches us, and invited, "Come in. I made apple tea with cinnamon. Oh, do you still like it?" She nodded. "Leo, come now. Video once entered. How, wow. Sat on the same sofa, where one day she cried with emotion when she told me that she would be a mother for the first time. But now, her body was in a hurry. The legs crossed and uncrossed. His eyes ran away from mine. Why, up. I sat down with my cup in hand and let the silence lengthen. Because silence, my daughter, silence says more than any question. No. And she tried to fill the void with loose phrases. The trip was tiring. Jason has a bit of a cold. Now, we are trying to solve some work things. I just listened. smile, and it is did I care. I still no touchdown, no yet. And, as if taking a stone out of my pocket and offering it tenderly, I returned. What you did not get it from this job. Everything is fine here. Yes, the house is at peace. I just thought it was strange that you sold the beach house without asking me. She froze. He tried to disguise it with a sip of tea, but his hand trembled slightly. Mom, it was a difficult decision. We thought it would be the best at that moment. And you always said you wanted me to be okay. Right? I laughed inside, because this was the oldest emotional trap in the world, using the mother's love as a justification for a scam. But on the outside, I just adjusted the scarf around my neck and replied, Of course, your good is always the most important. And I let her drown in her own disguised guilt. Jason didn't come. She was, according to her, resolving some papers. But I knew. He knew he was hiding, waiting for the ground to stop shaking. Because when the truth begins to appear, the cowards withdraw, while the strong straighten their spine. And in that room, for the first time, I felt more upright than ever. Samantha looked around. He was looking for signs. Maybe the envelope from the notary's office. Perhaps the disappearance of some painting. Some document, but wouldn't leave any clues. The final blow would come as a hug. Unexpected, warm, knowing, and rallying. City, She spoke of banalities, of time, the price of the euro, from tasteless food in Germany. Wow. And I did, because the more she talked, the clearer it became that there was no regret there, only fear. Fear of being discovered, fear of losing everything I thought I had achieved. And, more than that, afraid of me. And, look, if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone who has been through something similar, will it help me carry it forward? Majosandam, Nista, Fadio. Like and subscribe here to the channel. This makes more difference than you think, because there are a lot of quiet people out there, carrying scars that still bleed, and sometimes all we need is a story that tells us, you're not alone. Samantha got up after an hour. He said he needed to solve some things with the bank. I accompanied him to the door. She hugged me lightly, and I responded firmly, as if to say in silence, I know. When she left, she stood for a moment on the sidewalk, maybe waiting for me to call, for me to ask something, but I just closed the gate calmly. Locked, and I went back inside. I sat on the chair on the porch and let the wind touch my face. It was the October breeze, fresh, with the smell of dry leaves. The street was quiet, but inside here something was beginning to boil, because the game was in motion, and I had given the right piece. Now, she was waiting for the envelope to reach her. Can you imagine the reaction of a daughter when she discovers that the house where she lives has been taken over by her own mother, silently, justly, and without raising her voice? So stay with me now, because what she found at the entrance the next day, was the beginning of the lesson that life had in store for her. I scheduled the meeting with Richard on a gray Monday, one of those that seemed to carry secrets in the clouds. Samantha thought it was strange when I mentioned that I wanted to talk calmly. In a neutral place? Wow. She asked if I was sick, if it was something with my will, if I needed medical care. I said it was just a conversation between mother and daughter, with a little more formality. And she, of course, Nia, accepted now, still thinking I was in control. How? We arrived at the office at the same time. She came well dressed, with a beige blazer, light makeup, nice, too sweet perfume. Smile as if you were going to do a favor. Mom, if it's to leave everything in order, I need to more calm. A children by. I can take care of it for you. You just need to tell me where you want to sign. Richard received us with the usual seriousness, offered coffee, and went down. We sat at the table. She looked around as if she were already waiting to leave with some document in hand. It was then that, bluntly, she began, you know, Mom, nah, with everything that's happening, I think it would be better for us to think about the future. These things of notary, transfer, get very complicated when the person, in short, when he is no longer here. So I thought it would be nice to put everything in my name. So, now, anything. It's already solved, and no one will need to run after paper. She spoke with rehearsed tenderness, as if offering help, but what she held out was a poisoned spoon. Richard said nothing. She just opened the briefcase slowly, took out the sealed envelope, and pushed it towards her. Before any decision, I think it's important for Samantha to read this. She took the envelope without understanding, broke the seal, and began to read in silence. Gradually, the expression on his face changed. Her eyes narrowed. The hand that held the paper trembled. The color fled from his face. What is this? She asked, almost voiceless. I took a deep breath. Whilst I kept my gaze calm. It's a legal warning. It concerns the apartment. She read another excerpt, her eyes wide. But, no, that's eviction? Is that a threat? I just said, don't sign anything today. I'll go home. Read it calmly. The silence that followed was thick as stone. She tried to laugh. No, stammered. Whoa, Mom, is this serious? Is it some kind of joke? Are you going to get me out of my house? And I remained silent. Richard arranged the papers in the folder, as if closing a chapter. Samantha stood up slowly. The shock was visible. For the first time, she didn't know what to say, and that's when I realized there, in that room, the image she had of me began to crumble. She was no longer the fragile lady in the backyard. Well, it was the woman she didn't know, and maybe you never did. After she left, Richard looked at me and said, wow, she's going to try to reverse it. It will come with everything. And I just replied, Neil, let it come. Now, she is the one who will go after it. No, sometimes the most painful thing is not to find out that we have been deceived. It is to realize that we have allowed ourselves to be deceived by love. But the heart, when it learns how, does not forget, and the justice that comes after, wow, it tastes like dignity. Stay with me until the end, because if you thought that was the strongest part, you still haven't seen what she did when he found out that he lost everything. Are you ready to listen? Because I'm ready to tell you. The phone rang the next morning with a fury that nearly broke the silence of the house. I answered without haste, already imagining what would come from the other side. It was Samantha. The voice, which had always been sweet even when he lied, was now loaded with nervousness. What? Mom, what is this? What role was that? Why did you do this to us? I took a deep breath, leaned my back against the kitchen chair, nod, and replied with the same serenity that I had kept all those months. I only gave back what you taught me. The difference is that I did it fairly. On the other end of the line, silence, and then more. A sigh. Can we talk better? You got it all wrong. Mom, everything. I was just trying to make life easier. That hurt me a little, I confess, because the lie, when it comes from those we love, enters like a knife and still asks if it can stay. I hung up without saying anything else. She tried to call me again twice that day. Then he started sending messages. Oh, some sweet, some harsh. Jason, on the other hand, was silent. Meow. I learned from a common neighbor that he was seen leaving the building with 2 suitcases. Alone, in a hurry, and that since then, no one has seen him there. Samantha stayed. Oh, of course. He always thought he could find a way. He always thought I would back down, but not this time. The following week, the official letter from the court was delivered by hand. 30 days to vacate the property. No emotional clause. No apology accepted. It was black and white. Legal. Clean. Irrefutable. Samantha panicked. He called my house on a Sunday night, sobbing, "Mom, you can't do that to me. It's where I live." And all I could say was, what about the house where I've spent all the summers of my life? The one in Folly Beach? That one you sold over the phone? I heard her cry for a few seconds. Then he hung up. That same day, I went to the porch, sat down in my rocking chair, the same one George gave me on our 20th wedding anniversary, and started knitting. It was like going back in time. I found myself there, years ago, waiting for Samantha to come home from school, listening to the low radio, drinking lemon tea with honey. It was a peace that did not match the silent war that was being waged outside. But that's how I chose to fight, with dignity, with time, and with the certainty that what is right finds a way. Have you ever noticed how certain memories smell? That blue yarn that I wrapped around my finger while knitting took me straight to an afternoon in 1994, when my daughter was still a girl and said that she wanted to live in the beach house forever, because there the sky was closer to us. Look how things change, don't you? Sometimes I think that time is a road that we travel with our eyes closed. and he only understands when he looks back. And if you who are listening to me now also have a memory like this, which seems tattooed on your heart, tell me in the comments. Share with me. Maybe your story is also a key for someone to find themselves. You can write, "I've lived it," or "I know how it is," or even just tell a little bit. Because when we share memories, the pain becomes lighter, numb, and silence less lonely. In the following weeks, I noticed a change in the neighborhood. Some neighbors started to look at me differently. Maybe they had heard things. Maybe she had spoken. Irrespective of, what mattered was that, finally, I slept with a calm heart. The nights no longer consumed me. The memory of George accompanied me without regret. And her presence, well, this one disappeared little by little, but I knew something was coming, and it wasn't regret. It was desperation. The question that haunted me was, how far does a hurt daughter go? When do you realize you've lost control? Because there are people who learn, but there are people who sink. And she hadn't chosen yet. I woke up before the sun that morning. The sky was still a bluish-gray blanket, and the city slept, shrouded in a silence that only those who carry a lot of memory know how to respect. I made my coffee, put on the thickest coat, the one George loved because he said it made me look like a literature teacher, and hit the road. My destination was Folly Beach. I hadn't been there for years, since it was sold treacherously and without my permission. I forbade myself to remember that place as my own. But now, she was mine again, and not only on paper. Wow. The sale of the house was reversed, thanks to Richard's meticulous work. The signature had been torn from me at a time when I barely knew how to differentiate pain from reality. That was coercion, and the justice system recognized it. The new buyer had no choice but to return the property. The amount, well, yeah, of course, was refunded. But what I wanted back, it didn't fit in cash. Crossing that bridge that leads to the island was like crossing a line in time. Every meter of the road brought me a scene. George driving with his left hand while his right hand held mine. Teenage Samantha lying in the back seat, with the radio playing some 90s music. And the girls, my granddaughters, running in a colorful bikini, with their hair stuck with salt and their laughter loose. I parked in front of the old blue house. It was there, just as it was etched in my memory. Simple, with the windows closed, the wooden fence creaking in the wind. And that balcony that has seen so many happy summers. When I set foot in the sand, barefoot, I felt the cold rise down my spine. It was as if the beach had also been waiting for me all this time. I walked slowly to the edge of the sea. The sky was already beginning to clear. The sound of the crashing waves reminded me of George's heartbeat when I lay on his chest on warm nights, listening to stories about everything and nothing. I sat down for a few minutes, just to feel, just to remember, just to come back to me. It was then that I heard footsteps in the sand. What? A man approached. Noun. Hat. Heavy coat. Ah. Light eyes. He smiled with surprise, as if encountering a familiar ghost. Mrs. McCarthy? He asked. You are back. It took me a second to recognize him. It was Mr. Dorsey. No, the former caretaker of the street, who tended the gardens of several houses there. In back was sitting, I replied, laying, with a nod and a shy smile. He put his hand on his chest. Respectfully, it's good to see this house back in the right hands. I climbed the steps of the balcony with my legs shaking, not of age, but of emotion. I put the key in the lock with steady hands. The door creaked as it opened, as if to say, at last, entered Hyone. The dust took over, but the smell was the same. A mix of old wood, salt and souvenir. I opened the windows one by one, letting the wind sweep the corners. The curtains inflated hard. The sun invaded as if demanding space. There, in that room, I sat on the floor, cross-legged, and cried. Oh, not sadness, but of return. It was like coming back to my own body after years away. Each wall told a story. The chalk line on the wood in the hallway, made by the girls to mark who grew faster. The round mark of a glass of lemonade on the kitchen table. The smear of sauce that never left the carpet. And I stood there, breathing it all again. George always said, we don't lose what is ours. We only lend it to time. And now, after all, time gave me back that piece of me? No, there are places that are not just places. They are chests of who we were. The beach was not just a summer destination. It was the altar of our purest joys. And if there's one thing I've learned in this life, it's that when we find something that our heart recognizes, it's as if the whole world stops to welcome us back. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever returned to a place after many years and realized that, even in silence, it was waiting for you? If you lived through it, or know someone who has, comments below. Tell me, nod, so. Sometimes, just remembering, we heal a little more. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I bathed in the sea with my clothes and everything on. I entered slowly. Let the envelop envelop me up to my shoulders. I closed my eyes and whispered, thank you. George. The cold current washed away my tiredness, sorrow, betrayal. For a few minutes, I was just a woman, not a mother, not a widow, not betrayed, and just me. When I got out of the water, I saw something curious in the sand. A white, perfect, round shell. I took it. I kept it in my pocket. It was small, but it could fit a whole world. Now, back in the house, with the windows open, the curtains dancing, and the sound of the sea rocking the air. I felt that something new was about to happen. Not with shouting, not with scandals, but with the sweet weight of truth. Because what Samantha didn't know yet is that her biggest loss was not the apartment, it was the chance to be someone better. Will she realize this before she loses everything? Or will he still try to fight, even after everything that has already fallen apart? That's what I'm about to find out. It was a muggy afternoon, one of those in which the air seems to weigh more than usual, when I heard knocks on the front door. 3 dry touches. I turned down the radio, wiped my hands on my apron, and went to answer. When I opened it, there he was, Jason. Messy hair, no top, deep, dark circles, a rumpled shirt that looked like it had been put on in a hurry. He didn't say hello. He didn't call me Mrs. McCarthy. No. Didn't even pretend that polite charm he wore so well at Sunday dinners. I just said, "We need to talk." I didn't move. I looked at him for a few seconds that seemed too long, and perhaps because there was still a part of me that respects the formalities of pain, I opened the door and let him in. He walked to the kitchen without waiting for an invitation. He sat in his usual chair, as if he still had some right to that space. I poured coffee, without saying anything, and sat down facing him. Jason held the cup with both hands, as if clinging to anything that is not falling apart. His voice came low, broken. I made a mistake, a serious mistake. I got involved with the wrong people, trusted in promises of quick profit, and when I saw it, I was already in the middle of a hole. And then we thought, that maybe, with the sale of the house, the car, we could get out. He spoke us as if Samantha and he were one and the same, a single entity, a joint plan, a shared era. And I just listened. I didn't interrupt him once. He continued. Samantha didn't want it to be like that. She was fragile, worried about you, about everything that was happening. We thought we could solve things, with the money. And now, I can be arrested. And she's in shock. He thinks you won't really forgive. At that moment, he looked up and stared at me. And there, in that look, full of fear and despair, I saw the same boy who, years ago, promised me that he would take care of my daughter, Noah, who gave me flowers on Mother's Day, who helped me set up the crib of my first granddaughter, and, at the same time, I saw the man who moved the papers in my house, that he lied, not who signed in my name, that he thought I was too old to understand what he was doing. I just wanted to ask you something, Miss Helen, he said. His voice breaking. Think about her. In Samantha, she may have been wrong. I had got to away, but she's still your daughter. And if you do that, if it goes ahead with the eviction, with everything, it will end the family. It will leave us without ground. I know we hurt ourselves, but you are the only one who can prevent everything from falling apart for good. I finished my coffee slowly, resting the cup on the saucer gently. My dear Natarbad, resting the cup on the saucer gently. And I stared at him for long seconds, not angry. What? Not even with pity, but clearly clarity that only time gives. The clarity of someone who has seen the sun rise after nights too dark to believe that it would return. Jason, now, Aptanikam, Alonasubchat, and the sailor notched her wall. You entered this house. She ate my bread, sat at my table, no, took my daughter to the altar. Mandalternster, and is steady in Kestwit. But do you know what you've never done? He shook his head, not knowing what to expect. It never entered my soul. He never really looked at me. He always underestimated me. He always treated me like an old ornament in the room, respected by tradition. Ignored by convenience. And that's why it's coming out of it now. How? He was silent. Wow. A silence that hurt more than any fight. He stood up slowly. Now I don't know how to so. Without saying a word, he walked to the door. Before leaving, now, he turned and looked at me, as if he was still waiting for one last gesture from me, a sign of weakness. But there was no more, just serenity. When the door closed behind him, we sit around. I took a deep breath. The air entered my lungs as if I had, at last, cleansed every corner of my soul. And there, in the kitchen of the house I built with love and sacrifice, I understood that justice, when it comes with silence, has a sweet and firm taste. But there was still one piece left on the board, the hardest, the one I feared for the longest time. And she was on her way. Because Samantha wasn't going to leave it like that. And the question that kept coming out of my head was, would she still come with words? Or with invisible weapons that only children know how to use? The news first came from the mouth of Mrs. Hargrove, Aginef Anidiwa, neighbor of number 11. Always with a lemon cake in her hand, and her tongue sharper than a new knife. She stopped me on the sidewalk, adjusted her straw hat, and said, in that tone that mixes amazement and pleasure, "Did you know? Oh, Jason, the lady's son-in-law, is being sued. Now, bank fraud. They say it will get a few good years." I just nodded my head and kept walking. He didn't need to say anything. The walls of that street already knew much more than I was willing to tell. In a few days, the news spread like wind on a full clothesline. The neighbors who had previously offered me pies with pity now greeted me with respect. Some looked away, perhaps out of shame for having believed what they did not know. Others looked at me with a new glow, as if to say, "You are more than we thought." I didn't seek revenge, but, I confess, that respectful silence around me sounded like a collective apology. Richard took care of everything in court. Why? I didn't go. He didn't need to be there to prove anything. My name appeared in the documents as the legal guardian of the holding company that had recovered the properties, including the building where Samantha lived. The decision was public. The building would undergo renovations and would be rented to other families. Honest families who needed a fresh start. And wow, well, they would have to find another place, another way, another way. Samantha didn't call me, Mom. He did not send a letter. He didn't knock on my door. I learned that she spent a few days at a friend's house, then moved to a smaller apartment, rented in the name of third parties. Jason, how, according to the local newspaper, how, was prevented from leaving the state. I read everything calmly. New Singda, drinking my coffee like someone reading the end of an old book, already knowing the outcome, but enjoying every line. On any given afternoon, how? I put on my hat, tied my scarf around my neck, and walked down Church Street. Now, I found in a staircase for the first time in a long time. My steps were steady, and I didn't have to bend over to please anyone anymore. He no longer carried the weight of doubt on his back. People looked at me. Some waved, others just watched. And I felt that everything was, at last, in its place. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe, by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Like this video and sign up. And let's make this story reach those who need it. Because there are a lot of people who think they've lost everything, when in fact, it's just starting to find itself. But even with all the justice done, with everything returned, wow, with the names on their proper papers, there was still something in me that needed to be said. And it wasn't for the neighbor, nor for the lawyer, nor for the courts. It was for her, Lishon, my daughter, Nidon Tom, Alfornyat Sidin Karisina, because what her pain has done to my life, it could not be solved with letterhead. And that's why that night I wrote a letter, but not just any letter, one that could change everything, or put an end to any hope once and for all. Would she be ready to read it? Would I be ready to deliver? I chose the most beautiful paper from my drawer, the one I bought more than 20 years ago in a stationery store in Charleston, thinking that one day I would write a welcome note to my first great-granddaughter on it. But life, with its crooked winds, made me use it for something else. I sat at the living room table, with the sun hitting my back lightly and the sound of the clock marking the seconds, as if asking for care with every word. I took the pen, took a deep breath, and started. Samantha, whoa, my daughter, I thought long and hard before writing this letter, and maybe I should have written earlier, or maybe I should never write. But there are things that, if we don't say it, turn into stones inside us. And I don't want to carry any more stones. I'm tired of being too strong in silence. You grew up seeing my strength as weakness. I thought that my quiet way was submission, that my delicacy was a lack of firmness. But now that the world has turned and you've seen me standing, perhaps you can understand that there is a kind of courage that doesn't make noise. I don't write to blame you. I don't write to hurt. I just want you to remember, because forgetting is a kind of death, and I refuse to be buried alive in your memory. Do you remember the rag doll I sewed when you broke your arm and couldn't play with the other kids? I sewed it by hand, Leo, with leftover fabric from the curtain. Oh, and named it Rosie, because you said roses healed. Oh, you carried Rosie everywhere, as if she understood you better than we did. One day, I found you in the backyard, with her on your lap, saying, "Stay calm. Now, accept his child, doubting tea. Mommy will take care of you." Or the trips to Savannah. You loved it when I made a peanut butter sandwich and put it in the cooler bag along with sliced apples. He said that mother's food was better than expensive restaurants. And on the way, you asked, "When am a mother?" Why, I'll be too. Will I know how to do the same? I said I would know. If I did it with love, will not count. I also write to you to remember the blue dress at your prom, the one you thought was ugly when you tasted it. But later, when your partner looked at you in the school mirror, they said they looked like a star. I spent the previous night adjusting the straps. My hands were already hurting at that time, but you didn't even notice, and I never told. Daughter, Weiss, Heider, Nonizam, you got the best of me, the purest, the most sincere, the most whole, and yet you sold me. He sold my story, my family Sundays, my shelter. Now, it's sold as if I were part of an inventory, as if love had a price. But you know what? I'm not empty, no, because what's left of me, it's more than enough. I discovered, oh, in the midst of all this whirlwind, gosh, God, that there's still a whole woman inside me, a woman who knows who she is, who understands the value of memory, peace, silence full of truth. I don't want you back out of obligation, not even out of remorse. I want that if you ever come back, it will be with a clean heart. No, not to ask for inheritance, but to sit on the porch and look at the sea with me. As before, this house is full of memories, but it will only stay alive if you learn to respect them. Not with words, but with actions. Take care of yourself, and if I ever have a daughter, remember me, and do it differently. I signed only with my name. Helen went unto the open wire. I didn't. It was still not mommy, nor with love. No, I should do, because now I needed to sign as a woman, not as someone's role in someone else's life. I folded the letter carefully, as if folding a piece of one's own chest. I put it in the envelope and left it on the kitchen table, along with a white seashell I brought back from the last walk in Folly Beach. That shell was the symbol of what was reborn in me. Maybe she will never read it. Maybe read and tear it up. But that doesn't matter, because the truth, when spoken with love, and gosh, does not expect acceptance. It just exists, and it occupies the space of what was once pain. No, there are letters that we write to someone, but that are actually to ourselves. And I know, from the bottom of my chest, that this was one of those. And what will she do when she reads it? Will you understand? Or will he try one more time? Bend me? I set up my new house as someone who sets up a sanctuary. Small, now and Diageo. Bright, with windows that let the sun in without asking permission. It's in a Mount Pleasant, in a neighborhood where the gardens bloom slowly and no one is in a hurry to leave. I chose a single-story house with a modest backyard, but which gives me the freedom to walk barefoot and feel the earth, something I hadn't done for decades. I brought few things. George's photo, which is on the small table next to the armchair. The old radio that he repaired with so much zeal, and that now plays softly while I paint. And my books, those who resisted all the changes, all the boxes, all the silences. The first night there, I slept with the window open and my heart light. There was no noise of the past there, no shadow of charges, just the sound of the wind among the trees and the song of a stubborn cricket in the corner of the garden. The next day, I drank coffee alone, looking at the plants that were beginning to sprout near the fence. I didn't feel lonely. I felt relief. I went back to taking watercolor classes at the community center. The teacher, a lady named Grace, welcomed me with a hug and a box of paints. Here, no one judges anyone's trait, only the courage to start over, she said. And my welcome, and change out too. And I understood. That's what I needed. Courage to start over, with slow hands, but whole soul. I also started attending the reading group at the public library. Women my age, some widows, others separated, all with stories marked on their faces and a curious twinkle in their eyes. Every week, a new book, a new conversation, a new chance to listen and be heard. When they ask about Samantha, I take a deep breath and say serenely, she's in the world now. I am at peace. No one insists, and am grateful for that. Because some pains, when they heal, become part of the skin, but they don't need to be exposed to every coffee. The other day, while painting a landscape of Folly Beach, I felt a tear flow. It was not sadness. It was a good longing. Of George, of the granddaughters running on the sand, of the smell of sea air that stuck to the clothes, but not what I was. It was a clean nostalgia, which reminded me that I lived, and that I continue to live now. In my own way, I started to take care of the flowers in the garden with an affection that I never had time before. I talk to them. Yes, I do. I ask if they are enjoying the land, if the water is enough, and sometimes I think they respond. How? Not with words, but with the way they open, silent and whole, Nasukan, even after the rain. If someone asked me today what I am, I would answer, we can be house, free for the first time, free of imposed papers, of demanded loves, of guilt planted in me by hands that claimed to love. And you know what? I like the woman I've become. I like the calm that lives in me now. I like the way my feet touch the ground without fear. But at the bottom, when I don't see, there is a door that I have not yet closed, a door that may need to be opened one last time. Because sometimes, for us to be truly whole, we need to look into the eyes of pain and say goodbye. Oh, and that's why that morning, when I saw her name on the phone display, I answered. The sun was slowly lowering that late afternoon, painting the leaves of my garden with a gold so serene that it seemed like a blessing. The breeze brought the smell of wet earth and freshly watered flowers. I walked down the porch slowly, with my shawl on my shoulders and my thoughts loose, like leaves that we no longer try to hold. It was one of those afternoons when silence doesn't weigh you down. He hugs, in which time does not run. It rests. I thought of George. I always think he would be sitting there with me, barefoot and glass of iced tea in his hand, looking at me in that way that said it all without having to open his mouth. Sometimes I even miss his silence, because true love has this power. It fills even when it is lacking. I smiled to myself, remembering when he said that if I were a tree, I would be a willow, firm and flexible. And maybe he was right, because I bent it, but I didn't break it. I also thought of Samantha, but this time without pain, without that stab in the chest, without the anger camouflaged by nostalgia. I just thought as if she were a part of me that went down another road. And that's okay. We don't raise children for them to stay. We raise them for them to be. And sometimes, on this path of being whatever they want, they forget who we are. Well, but it's not about that anymore. It took me a long time to understand that being a mother is not being a martyr. We were not made to sacrifice ourselves until we disappear. Love doesn't ask us to erase ourselves. It asks for presence, not absence of self. And I was present for decades. Oh, Naya. Hey, Perasi, Kaberoke. Constant. Imuday, Nuodokinamai. Daddy sound. Loyal. Hello. But there came a time when I had to choose. Either I kept waiting, begging for crumbs of attention, or I withdrew with dignity, giving myself back to myself. And that's what I did. I don't expect any more calls that don't come, nor late justifications. Time has taught me that there are things that cannot be fixed, but that we learn to put aside, as one leaves a stone on the side of the path to walk lighter. Today, I belong to myself. My days are mine. My silence is too. I paint, I read, I walk, and alive, without an audience, without applause, without a script. I don't need to anything else. Not for her, not for anyone. And strange as it may seem, there is beauty in this well-chosen solitude. There is dignity in choosing one's own corner. There is strength in no longer waiting. I didn't become bitter. I became free. But when the phone rang that late afternoon and I saw her name shining on the screen, I knew the story was not yet over. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to hear what still needed to be said. Would it be too late? Or did time still hold one last answer for the two of us? That night, after the phone call? There was no crying. There was no reconciliation. No promises of change. Samantha said that she thought about me sometimes. That life had taken too hard a path, and I listened. I listened as if looking at an old photograph with nostalgia, but without illusion. How? She is away now, in another city, oh, in another time, and yet still they are not gonna bonny kill. Maybe one day he will understand what he lost. Maybe not. But I no longer build hope on absences. Today, I build good silence, the kind that we listen to with our chests in peace. Jason, as far as he knew, made an agreement with the courts. He will have to work, pay what he owes, and learn the way life teaches us when we don't listen. And I'm still here, in my little house in Mount Pleasant. I plant daisies in the backyard and read my old letters gratefully, drink coffee slowly, and smile in the mirror without apologizing for existing. When I look around, I see not what I have lost, but what I have become again, a whole woman who did not die. He just stopped begging for love. And if there's one thing I have learned in this life, it's that time doesn't heal everything, but it shows everything. It shows who stays, who pretends, who betrays, who comes back, and it shows, above all, who we are when everything around us falls apart. That's how I discovered that my strength wasn't to scream, it was to stand in silence. Because sometimes justice comes slowly in the form of peace, and peace. It is the greatest revenge of all. If you have come this far, I'm you all, listening to my story with an open heart. I thank you, really, because telling this was not easy, but to know that someone there, maybe you, listened to me, it warms me up inside. Now, if this video touched your heart in any way, leave a like here for me. It's like a silent hug that says I saw you. And if you want to come back for another coffee with me, subscribe to the channel. There's always an empty chair on my porch. Tell me which city you're watching from. It is beautiful to know where each soul that stops here a little bit comes from. And it activates the bell, too. That way you don't miss out when the coffee is brewed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.